The Untold Stories of Sanibel is being made possible in part by Bailey's General Store, City of Sanibel Historic Preservation Committee, Lee County Government, Sanibel Captiva Community Bank, and the Sanibel City Council.
Florida, long the land of the adventurer, the fortune seeker, the aged, and the infirmed, burst into the light of the sun about 15,000 years ago. Aborigine people were said to worship the sun, to whom they attributed the good fortune of all their victories and longevity. In the 1500s, the Spanish conquistadors sought riches in gold and silver. France, England, and Spain fought for years over control of the land of the sun. The young United States purchased the tropical peninsula from Spain in 1821 at a bargain price, and American settlers quickly became land speculators. In the 1880s, railroads laid the tracks connecting land-rich Florida to the outside world. The wealthy, the curious, the tourists, the settlers, and the dreamers all discovered the warmth and the beauty of our tropical paradise. Fishing, farming, cattle, and citrus became the mainstays of the growing economy. The automobile and the jet engine made Florida a winter destination or for life. Today, the state bustles with growth and prosperity. The Sunshine State is home to millions who enjoy an unsurpassed quality of life. Florida is fulfilling its destiny from the time the embryonic land saw the first light of the sun. The 21st century remains the unconquered challenge.
Hello, I'm Matt Johnson. Welcome to Southwest Florida History, the Untold Stories. We're exploring Sanibel Island and learning about the place Ponce de Leon described as the island that jutted out into the sea. De Leon and other explorers encountered the heartland of the Clusa Empire here. Later, Spanish settlers came from Cuba to fish Sanibel's fertile waters. Here they mingled with natives and forged a lasting connection through official and unofficial trade. By 1833, after being mapped and platted by New York developers, Sanibel Island awaited its first settlers. Settlement would not come as quickly as anticipated.
Our story of Sanibel begins in the 1800s, revealing the barrier island's connection to the Civil War.
We had Confederates trying to smuggle cattle through the lines to the Confederate forces. And we had Union, mostly Navy, forces that were trying to blockade them, to stop them. Sanibel was one of those places where people hid and popped out of the mangroves and all of that. But I think what was most important about the Civil War as far as Sanibel's development was the fact that they saw it, that they remembered it, they came back.
Eventually, Sanibel would have a landmark that would serve as a navigational aid that would later become a symbol of home for islanders.
The Sanibel Lighthouse is a cornerstone of Sanibel's history. The first settlers to Sanibel back in 1833 petitioned the federal government for a lighthouse, but it took 50 years for the lighthouse to come to fruition.
By 1835, there was a hurricane, there was the Seminole War, and it just went by the wayside. There was no one here to need a lighthouse anymore. No one was living on the island when the light went up. It was strictly because of the waterway traffic.
And finally, on August 20th, 1884, the Sanibel Lighthouse was lit.
Sanibel finally had its lighthouse, and now homesteaders could take advantage of the government's Homestead Act when Sanibel opened for homesteading in 1888.
It essentially gave plots of land to people who were willing to live on and improve these areas of land for at least 5 years, and then they could apply for their homestead certificate and they would own the land at that point.
By the late 1800s, homesteading attracted an array of people to Sanibel, and they told their friends about the island that they came to love.
George Barnes was an evangelistic preacher. He was a worldwide traveler, and he built the island's first church there. He was originally a Kentuckian, and he brought a lot of other Kentuckians here, including the Bailey family, the Nutts, and many, many others.
When my family first moved to the island and homesteaded here, they were the third family on the island. There were folks that were doing farming and fishing and whatever.
Letitia Nutt, who was a Confederate officer's widow, did homestead here. So when she and her 3 daughters came here, she brought an elegance to the island, a veneer of civilization or gentility.
Fishing was attracting its share of people to Sanibel as well.
In 1885, the first tarpon was caught on hook and line, and that hooked sports fishermen. They were down here in droves.
Homesteading was not the only way to obtain property. Hallie Matthews acquired the additional property she ran her hotel on in an unusual way.
When Jane Matthews died, she left Hallie $500 and her niece the land with the houses on it. So the niece didn't want the land on Sanibel, she wanted the $500, so they switched. And that's how there's 17 acres here that they got Island Inn, what is now Island Inn. In fact, she gave land away for people to build houses on if they'd come and eat with her.
Sanibel inspired such intense emotions. Miss Hallie Matthews described arriving in Sanibel in the late 1800s in a letter she later wrote.
It was way back in 1895 I came to Sanibel with our 4 children. Our train had 9 sleepers. We had a lovely trip to Sanibel through the beautiful waters from Punta Gorda. Mr. Matthews met us, and he had a hard time getting me off the pier, for the beach was covered with fiddler crabs. I thought they were spiders, and I refused to get off the pier, to the amusement of all on the beach. It was indeed like fairyland. We were taken to the only hotel at the time called The Sisters, managed by an Episcopalian minister and his most delightful family.
Hallie says that their first thought was for the education of their children, and the Nutt sisters, well, Mrs. Nutt and her 3 daughters were here, and they all taught school. So they set up a school.
With all the people on the island came the need for a general store. The Bailey family was happy to oblige.
But somebody had to order the mules, the plows, the fertilizer, the seeds, the overalls, the white bacon, the grits, the beans, and shovels, hoes, seeds, whatever needed to be done, and he evolved into a store.
It was a very simple store, but well stocked, particularly with canned goods and goods in boxes, but also some fresh produce. So you could really exist in terms of all of your needs. In terms of food, particularly, I believe they also sold a few simple bits of clothing, t-shirts and things like that. But you could exist on the island with Bailey's store without ever going to Fort Myers.
Slowly, a small but distinct African-American community was starting to develop on Sanibel.
A number of African-American families came onto the island in the early 1920s. The black families that came here were basically started out anyway as sharecroppers working the farms. Many of them actually acquired their own property as well. Eventually there was a church that had been built in 1910, a Baptist church, and it was converted to a black schoolhouse for a number of years.
They said it wasn't enough blacks on the island to keep the school open, so it closed.
The island's resorts and community house introduced activities that turned into traditions that would stay with Sanibel for decades.
Oh, the Christmas was the best time of year around here. First, we all hurried to our dinner so we could get to the community, first to the church, the little island church. That was the little brown church. That was the only one at the time. Everybody went there on Christmas Eve. Francis Bailey read the Christmas story, and we had a short service. Then after that, we went across the street, the community building, and Santa Claus was there. And there was a gift for every child under 12.
The popular Shell Festival attracted people from all over the country.
What's now called the Shell Fair actually started back in about 1909. There were some reports in the Fort Myers papers about a shell competition, if you will, and it was between the winter residents at Casabel and at the Matthews Hotel, which is now the Island Inn.
Well, the seashells on the table would be each person's prized seashell. Some people would come and spend a month or two. Once a year, there would be a shell show in the community house, and the people would then display their best shells at the shell show.
Since Sanibel is an island, the only way to get there was by boat.
Well, Bailey's store probably was the town center, if you will, because that's all there was really at that point. The big deal at Bailey's was at mailboat time, which was 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Mailboat came from Fort Myers at 10 o'clock, unloaded mail and freight and passengers and whatever on Bailey's old dock. But the was a lot of camaraderie and friendship and whatever going on down at Bailey's, because, like I say, that was the hub of commerce there.
The ferry system actually started while things were booming back in about 1926 or so. And it was called the Sanibel Ferry at that time. And it was set up, it ran a few times, and then the hurricane of 1926 hit. They knew the storm was coming, and they took the ferry upriver to protect it. But after the storm, the ferry had totally disappeared. Of course, so had his business. 2 years later, the Kinsey brothers were talked into running a ferry from Punta Rassa over to Sanibel and back. Actually, Leon Crumpler talked him into that, and he became the first ferry captain and the head of the ferries throughout its entire system.
It was very exciting, by the way, especially for a youngster to get on that ferry and finally come to the end of the long journey, because it had taken us a week in an automobile to get down here.
When I arrived at the ferry landing, it was on a cold January day, and I thought to myself, what have I gotten myself into? And the wind was blowing and the seas were rough. And lo and behold, I saw these mountains of shells, seashells. I don't think I've ever seen as many seashells in all my life. It was really incredible. And of course, it's not like that today, although there are shells on the beach, but not in the quantity they were in those days.
There were many obstacles to getting a school started on Sanibel. Struggles to provide a quality education for Sanibel's children continued for years.
Well, there were 8 grades. There was 1 teacher, 1 desk, 1 pencil sharpener, 1 door, 1 closet, 1 stove to heat you by. But we had two whole outhouses. And as my brother said, he majored in recess. And I did almost as bad, not quite maybe.
You know what a coach whip snake is? He got a black head and a bronze body, a cream-colored body. It looks like a whip. So I caught this snake on the outside and killed it and coiled it up and put it in this drawer, see? And so then when class took in from noon, well, I started misbehaving, you know, just so she'd whip that drawer. Finally, she whipped that drawer open. She said, "Oh, that snake." Needless to say, we didn't have any more school the rest of the day. But I got a whomping when I got home, too. So.
Agriculture was a means of life on Sanibel with homesteaders, but things were about to change.
It settled down to tomatoes and peppers and squash and watermelon in the summertime. It became a huge business. Farmers were very prosperous, and it worked quite well for them until hurricanes began hitting.